Welcome to another episode of I Am That Rose podcast. I'm very excited about today's show. I got a good friend of mine who I've known for, how long have we known each other? 40 years plus?
41.
41 years. So I'm very excited about today's show. Today we are privileged to be joined, and our guest today is Jamie Holiday.
It's where you play the applause clip.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Price is Right music, please.
You know, I was sitting around, Jamie, and when I was thinking about doing this and just thinking about just number one, how privileged we were growing up, having a community of lost people, and we all supported each other. And whether I was aware of it or not, I think that played a big part in me starting this movement of I Am That Rose, because that was something so instrumental to helping me begin to find myself, to begin to see my self-worth, even though in comparison to today, it was just the beginning, and a lot of it was masquerading as other things, but just the community had saved my life.
Oh yeah, 100%. Hell, you saved my life a few times as you gave me rides down to take a little pause and go get some help, right? So I think you're right. How fortunate we were to have that small community of kids who all were unique. And all of us came with our own bag of issues, the ones we were willing to talk about and the ones we had to carry for many more years until we get to this place we are today. But the Heights, like that community, and then the Heights in general, like what a beautiful place to grow up. I mean, it is such a part of the fabric of who I am. Everything I learned about life, I learned somewhere around Cedar and Lee or Coventry and Euclid Heights or Noble and Mayfield. Those three cuts of the Heights were just instrumental in my life.
Yeah. What I want to do is I want you to go back to pre when we met. I'll let you tell your story, but go back as far as you can remember and kind of let us kind of get an idea of who Jamie was, and then we'll kind of transition into what happened and who Jamie is today. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. It's an honor and privilege. I'll try to hit the highlights in my old age here, in my deep into my mid 50s.
Yeah.
I find that I can start to talk and wander a little bit. So I'll trust you to bring me back on the path for the story, but happy to share. We'll hit the high points. Some of those high points are truly low points that, we'll have to talk about a little bit of that. You got to see how far down you go to determine how high you can get back up in life, right? So for me, I was born during the Nixon administration, early 70s, 1970. A couple of teenage parents, both had just turned actually 19 within weeks of me being born. So kids, right? As I look back from this age that I am today, they were just kids. Married. Father found the oil boom kind of happening down in South Texas, in the Houston area. And so as an infant, we moved down to Texas so he could work doing these big factory shutdowns, plant shutdowns, where they come in and weld new pipes and put in new routes and do all type of stuff like that. So definitely blue collar, big giant man, 6'3", 6'4", 250, 240, depending on how much he was drinking and how much he was working, but looked like a giant to me. My mom was a small 5'1", frail, 100-pound lady. And we were a family for what it was worth. But the early 70s were also part of that counterculture era, right? hippies and partiers, and my folks fell into that path. Mostly my dad. My mom was there kind of as a passenger, but participated as well. And so some of my earliest memories are being around drugs, alcohol, um, as it relates to my parents and their social circle. And somewhere in that journey or in that period of time, my father began distributing narcotics across Southeast United States from Texas over to Georgia and the Florida Panhandle. And so as a little kid, between the ages of 1 and 5, we would commute from Houston into Mexico several times a year, coming back with carloads of marijuana. And from there, it became Quaaludes and other prescription medications, and eventually heroin and other things that um, I'm not sure what all we were bringing, but I know those for sure. And then we would get back, and my father would disappear for weeks or months at a time out making these deals, unloading things, and then come back with money. Seems kind of, it was all normal to me, right? Anybody, I think as a kid, you just assumed this is what it's like at everybody's house. So it didn't seem strange to me until much later in life. But I think anybody that's been around addiction, it's been around folks who commit their income from narcotics trafficking and other things like that. Those don't come with really any retirement plans, 401k matches, healthcare benefits, right? It is a cash industry and it is a dangerous industry. Not much different today, right? With what we talk about with cartels and all that kind of chaos. It was a different world. There was a family going to Mexico for a couple of days vacation. I was always excited to swim in the pool. I clearly remembered one of my fondest memories of one of these trips was first time I dove down and touched the bottom of the pool. It was probably 3 or 4 feet, but you know, some of those things as a kid that you do it and do it and do it until you accomplish it, because at that time you're fearless. You haven't been taught to be afraid. And so there are some good memories that I tease out of those days, but most of those days were dark. My dad became complicit in beginning to use the drugs he was selling, became violent, became an IV drug addict, and it was a place of like terrible things happen to me, to my mother. You can imagine. I'll leave that to folks that have been around people that are spiraling in addiction and paranoia, probably some untreated mental health things, and then pouring alcohol on top of that, which tends to either fuel sadness or anger in most people. So this whole time, my mom was working her way through, not working her way, was attending college, working on a nursing degree, very committed to her learning. Tried to, the one thing about my dad and all his flaws, we never got evicted. We never had to pack our shit in the middle of the night. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we PG-13 on language?
Fine,
Okay. Okay. He paid the bills. He provided in his own kind of sick, twisted way. We never had to like run away from things. I don't recall ever losing power or not having food to eat. So again, there's in where I sit today, I'm able to kind of tease out some of these positive things. They'll never outweigh that experience and that trauma of watching and seeing and witnessing and being a part of just violence. But there's some good things that I can take along the way as well and celebrate. So as soon as my mother finished nursing school and graduated, she the very next day came and got me at a friend's house where I was hanging out watching Gilligan's Island, of all things. Can't watch Gilligan's Island without thinking about our escape. But by this time, my father had become somewhat deranged and violent and paranoid. There were always guns in our house because there was always a cash box that was kept under the bed. And so in this final weeks, months leading up to her graduation, there was just the violence had reached a level where my mom knew we were never going to escape there alive, that one day everybody would be dead. I think you hear about it tragically on the news so much. And I believe in my heart that had she not taken the steps, one, to secure her education and endure what she endured, but two, that next day to come pick me up and put me on a plane with her. And we bailed out of Texas. wound up in sunny Cleveland, Ohio, in December. I want to say mid 70s, 76, somewhere around there. And that was the last time I ever saw my dad. Tragically, he wandered, continuing that lifestyle for a few more years, and at the age of 29, he wound up, excuse me, shot to death through the neck in a single wide trailer outside Houston. And so that was that retirement plan that I referred to for drug dealers. There was no way out. So that was a hard one to stomach when I found out at 10, 11 years old that I would never see my dad again, right? As a kid, there was always hope. But it set out some heavy weights that I had to carry for a long time. And still today, sometimes find myself disappointed that I have a beautiful daughter. I have an adult son. That's a different story. Maybe we'll get to that if we don't run out of time. But I never had a role model or somebody that like show me how to tie a fishing knot or do these things. But I take that back. I had an uncle later in life do some things to help me. But anyway, we bailed out of Texas, never saw him again. And we arrived at my grandparents who lived in University Heights, stayed with them for, excuse me, long enough for my mom to get a job and a paycheck and get out. My grandparents absolutely hated my father by proxy. They then hated me because they hated my father. They're very staunch, unforgiving folks. So I go from this place of violence and craziness to a place where you could just feel the tension, right? There was a lot of "I told you so." There was a lot of belittling of my mom by my grandmother, and things again like you think it's better, but when you talk about the emotional toll, and as you know, 50 some years later, look back at this, we went from the frying pan into the fire to a degree because this was passive aggressive and anger and tension with people who were supposed to be rescuing us from this dire situation we were in. And so we weren't there very long, and then moved into a couple different places in the Heights while my mom worked through nursing at University Hospital. And then during that time, we were poor, right? Like she never spoke to my father, never pursued child support, never asked for any help. So we were on welfare. We were getting assistance. We used to have to go down off of Chester to get food stamps back in the day, right? When they were paper, like paper money. And I never forget, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old. We would go down there. Mom would leave the car running, tell me to get in the floorboard, lock the doors. And she's like, if something happens, you just drive away. And I would always be like, Mom, I'm only 9. I don't know how to drive. But it was this kind of catchphrase that became a joke eventually for us to be comfortable in the fact that we are in the hood, out of the element, just trying to get some food stamps to go get food so we could eat. The one thing, though, about my grandparents, despite all that tension, was they wanted me to be educated about God, and they wanted me to get a good education. And for that, they supplemented to get me into a Catholic school system. So I ended up at St. Anne's at Cedar in Coventry. You know, we lived on Kensington. Probably most people won't know these places, but you do. We didn't live in the nice part of the Heights, right? We lived in a triplex multifamily dwelling that the rent was $240 a month. And stuff didn't work, and we didn't have a dishwasher, and we didn't have a washer and dryer. But I got a great education from the Catholic school system. Phenomenal for the 8 years that I did it. What I also got was very conflicting information. And again, to focus on my journey and my story, is this is a place that was supposed to teach me about God and love and all of these wonderful Christian Catholic beliefs. But at the same time, they were beating the shit out of me with a stick, with a yardstick, with a map pointer, with a ruler, you name it, kneel on concrete for hours at a time. Like the punishment back in the mid 70s and early 80s was they beat the shit out of you. So again, I'm supposed to be learning these things about this wonderful God. I'm already out of these two tense situations. And now I begin to question, well, so wait a minute, I got to believe in all these things and follow all these rules, and then you're going to tell me something magic happens after I die, but nobody can really prove it scientifically. And I begin to challenge these belief systems. And then not only that conflicting message that I got there, but the fact of the matter is I just couldn't understand how, if there was this entity, how it could allow these horrible things to happen to me. And I'm thrust into the system with these kids, the St. Anne's families that live on Scarborough and all these other these mansions, and I don't fit in. I'm the kid with, zips and stuff from Kmart and Zares, wasn't it Zares? And wearing tough skins. I don't have Levi's, and so I didn't fit in socially either. And so I got to a place where my father had passed, and I was allowed to go see his family in Oklahoma. I was maybe 11 years old at the time. And my uncle, who actually taught me how to tie a fishing knot and bait a hook and do all those type of things, um, didn't know quite how to handle my father not being here. Right? I think nobody got a playbook, and so in trying to be the cool uncle, one night they're drinking, and I asked for, kids, let me have that, let me try it, and so he sure enough poured me some Wild Turkey 101, and let me sip it, and I downed it, and I felt this warmth that whiskey provides to your esophagus, and it hit my stomach, and then I felt the buzz, and then I felt courage, and then I didn't care about whether God was mad or angry or kind or loving. I didn't really care, and I wasn't afraid of what are all these people thinking of me. And not to mention, this is family who, you're my dad, to my uncle's role essentially to me as a child, right? Like, this is what my expectation was. I didn't know that at the time, but in looking back, for sure, he was a male role model. My dad's brother, the next best thing for me to emulate what he was doing, and drinking was part of it. And maybe a year or two later, it was trying to joint with him. In the meantime, I was discovering the liquor cabinet at home, the liquor cabinet at babysitters' houses, old old beers people put out on the curbside to throw away because they were probably sitting in their garage for 10 years. Whatever it was I could get that could make me feel nothing or make me escape the feelings I had of all these things that had happened to me. There were some things happening to me early in first and second grade at a caregiver's house that I won't go into, but I'll allow you to make your own conclusions. Things that men aren't comfortable talking about happening. And again, at the same time, there's this God story and narrative. And so now I'm escaping all this pain and turbulence anytime I could drink. Anytime I could drink. The problem was at 12, 13, 14, 15, it was easier to get weed than it was to get alcohol, right? In fact, Monticello Junior High, I hit the public school system and I found my people. They weren't the jocks, they weren't the smart kids. I found the dudes with leather jackets around the corner burning cigarettes before school, smoking weed, drinking beers. And as soon as I found that peer group, they were all messed up kids in their own way with problems at home and dads and family alcoholism and generational trauma. But we all clicked together and we all wore leather jackets and everyone called us burnouts, and we would get caught smoking in the bathroom. Coming into school, God, I never even thought about how bad we must have smelled like weed back then. Like, oh my gosh, it had to be obvious, right? Um, the rules were different. Things were less enforced back then. But I found those people and I just went off the deep end, right? As much as I could smoke, drink, start dropping acid, everything short of shooting up.
So you found your God.
I did. I found it, and it wasn't extrinsic. I just had to get it inside my body,
Yeah.
and I was okay. I was courageous. I was brave. I was not ugly with pimples. I was all those things disappeared, and I became funny. Although I still think I'm kind of funny. Um, absolutely. So, and at some point, and I was trying to think of this today, how we met each other. I believe it was through the Wakefields because I used to buy weed. I'm sorry, I believe it was through Dan W. I used to buy weed off of him, and he got sent to rehab. And somehow I got in some trouble. Maybe it was Opie when he was getting pulled to St. Luke's as well, running because I bought some.
You guys go to school together?
We were all at Heights at that point. This would have been
Okay.
the fall of '85, my freshman year. Somehow I was going to get in some big trouble. And I found out about this treatment place thing at St. Luke's. 28 days. I could catch up on my homework. I could, whatever. Um, Let me back up. For about 90 days before that, I was trying to go to meetings. I had fallen in. I think Wakefield had been like, hey, people are coming. We used to hang out at people's houses, right? I don't remember the exact circumstance, but then somebody popped me the questionnaire and I passed that entrance exam for AA meetings and somebody took me to a meeting, but I didn't really care about that part. What I found was more people who were kind to me, who saw me, who had idiosyncrasies and undiagnosed mental health issues and liked to smoke weed at some point and drank. And we all had these common threads. And I felt accepted. I felt like I was in a place where I was supposed to be. And it wasn't quite the same feeling as alcohol or drugs, but it was definitely a sense of belonging and being cared for and being safe. And much like you talked about earlier, I just couldn't stay sober. I kept like to do triple low acid. You guys broke. I don't know if you remember. You all came over and broke my 3-foot bong. There was a raid on my stash, but eventually, I was failing out of school because now they said I had an attendance problem, but I had a transportation problem. If you recall, it was 3 buses for me to get there. Ain't no way I'm riding 3 public buses and being somewhere at 7:30 in the morning, and when there's nobody there to prod me along. So, um, I was just getting kicked out F's, right? Because 7 unexcused, whatever that 5, whatever rule was, had all F's in study halls. So I was like, oh, go to rehab. Boom. I'll evade some responsibility, catch up on grades, get things squared away, 28-day vacation. I knew hospital food growing up with my mom being in the medical field. I slept in nurses' stations a lot when she didn't have somebody to look after me. So I went to St. Luke's. You guys had an intervention for me. They kept me in pajamas for a week. My hair was all cut off. And then apparently we have really good health insurance because they were like, oh, I wasn't a messed up kid, I promise. At least I don't believe so. But they were like, you need some extended care rehab, right? And out to the country in the middle of nowhere to New Directions, they hauled me. And again, I met great people. Some I still try to keep up with through social media and things like that. But what I really learned was these were people that all had problems like me. Secondary to that, what I learned was social engineering, if you will. I learned how to say the things to make the counselors believe that I was healing and I was growing and I was faking it, truly faking it and never making it. But I think you hit it early in the conversation was it laid this foundation that I knew what the 7 basic emotions were, and I understood how the emotional body worked and triggers and self-soothing and all of these other techniques that I just kind of faked my way through, and art therapy and all of these things that I was doing for the 9-10 months I call it incarcerated jokingly now, but I was, again, taken out of my house as a 15-year-old kid and thrust into a system, albeit it wasn't a foster care system or some of the tragedy of your story. It was still odd. And so I had to survive and learning how to talk my way through Catholic school and evade the beatings by being dynamically articulate with people. I learned how to work the room socially. And so I didn't heal much. Spent 4 or 5 years sober, made some of the best friendships I've ever had that were genuinely rooted in talking about feelings and things and what it's like to be this human. Often without judgment, often with compassion, and sometimes with some mentorship. I don't know if I ever told you, like the years we spent hanging out together were so helpful, healthy to me. But man, I looked up to you. Like for years, as I rode motorcycles and bought them, there wouldn't be a time I wouldn't look at my bike and think about how larger than life I thought you were as a person. And that for me at the time, I looked up to you, especially in the Cutlass era, like the Omni days, the Dodge Omni, where I had to crawl through and crawl over much. But when you upgraded to the Cutlass, like there's just so many good memories about the friendship that we had, the time we spent together, the summers, that month my folks went to Europe, even though somebody robbed my stepdad's house. Like we just two teenage kids with a carton of smokes each and a freezer full of frozen pizzas. But we talked about things of substance, and we went to meetings and we shared and we led meetings and we learned the construct. All the tools were given to us in those years. And I don't know that I would be where I am today if I wasn't able to come back 30, 40 years later, pick up those tools, dust them off, WD-40 them, and put them back to use. Like that, to me, has been so valuable. Sorry, let me get a drink.
But see, I think that's the beauty. And as I was sitting here listening to you, obviously I know exactly what you're talking about because I went through the exact same thing. And as I was listening to you, it made me realize that this movement is very important. I mean, it's very important because that was the thing. It was like we had no idea what we were talking about, but we heard the right message. And even though we knew it, we weren't able to take ownership of it, but we said it, right? And even though we didn't necessarily get sober and stay sober and change our life at that time, what happened was this dynamic that happens in the mind, and that is once you know the truth, you can never unknow the truth. You may not be in a position to take ownership of it, but my point is that social gathering and those friendships that were formed back then were so important. Like, still to this day, Jamie, I cannot understand why your mom trusted me to watch you in the house, right?
Well, because you're 3 years older, 4.
Yeah, but I'll tell you that to this day, that's something I look back on and I recognize that somebody saw something in me that I wasn't able to even see in myself at that point, right? I mean, there's so much of who I am today that was formulated from those connections, right? I mean, there was a lot of pain to get to that point. I mean, there was a lot of pain. I grew up in situations that I had no idea who I was, in the gangrene of the spirit, and went to Catholic schools and listened to what they had to say, and then I was like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that there's this God that's almighty and he's looking down at us, but he allows me to go through the pain and suffering that I'm going through. And then when I found drugs and alcohol, it was like, oh, this is where I belong, because it was the God. It was my God.
Yeah. Powerful.
Yeah. And so I know I'm on the right track with this, and I'm extremely passionate about this movement because I want to, when you're around people who can see you and understand you and pour into you, it creates a whole new person.
It does.
That's what we did, even not even knowing what we were doing. That's what we did. All the times we sat around and had these Fruity Pebble parties where we would just buy boxes of Fruity Pebbles and make cereal and eat and play pool in the basement and all that stuff. We were having meetings of the soul.
Yeah.
That later would manifest into the people that we are today.
Yeah, absolutely right. That foundation was there. The tools were there for us, built built on things we didn't understand. At least I didn't understand, but they are the benchmark which everything else I've done since then has been measured, both as a raging alcoholic until about 9 years ago, and every space in between there, and up to today still. And there's still hard days, right? Like you take away the alcohol, you take away whatever your vices are. That's cool. Now you're not numb, and you got to deal with that stuff at the bottom. And that's what I did, after we fell off and I moved away in the darkness of the night because lo and behold, drug dealers wanted to kill me. Go figure. Um, got cleaned up, got to the South, struggled alcoholically for 30 more years. Went through a marriage, into a second marriage that I almost lost everything. Right. And I'll spare you the alcohol story of, we all know what it's like to get drunk and black out and not know what you did or what you said and piece that together day after day after day. But I knew I had to change, and those tools, that foundation was there. And once I set my feet on that foundation that we had built, I knew that I could do this. And you know what? The first thing I had to do was find people like me and have some fellowship. And so I have a small group of friends that are all sober, that we keep in close communication, and we talk about things. Therapy was the other piece. And then getting hold of myself physically. I had to, again, as I admired you and looked up to you as a person a few years younger than you. I'll never be as big as you, right? But I reached out to you and I was wanting to get fit, and I went from sober and super fat and miserable, and worked through weight loss and structuring my body and yoga and all of these things to invest in myself, to include therapy and to include getting sober and maintaining a fellowship of people who are like-minded, who accept me and can see me when those hard days come. And I got to call somebody and be like, yo, today's the day I'm going to get ripped. And talk through those urges and talk through those hard things that are underneath it, right? The hard days don't ever go away. But your perspective does, just like I'm able to tease out those early memories of touching the bottom of the pool on a drug run in Mexico. That's like, that's not a normal memory, but that's the best I can do for those things.
Here's a question for you. And I know the answer, but I just want you, when you were caught in the midst of all this confusion, like when you were feeling these feelings that you felt and going through these dark periods, did it ever feel like that's how life was going to be?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Kind of like the kid on Peanuts with the cloud over him.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah. Um, it's hard to think about those dark down times, right? And we know life just goes in this ebb and flow of high times and low times, and the mid times when there's nothing wrong and nothing super exciting. It's meatloaf on Tuesday. But in those dark periods, there's two thoughts along that question, right? One is, this makes sense because this is how it's always been. And I attribute that to the trauma as a young person, including having my femur broken on accident at 12 months old, right? Like, I experienced this physical trauma of snapping my thigh bone in half. My mother fell on top of me, lost her footing, but took 2 days to seek medical attention. And I was in a body cast for 18 months after that, from my ankle to my chest. But that trauma, right? And so in those moments of darkness, you become conditioned to accept that this is just how life comes at you, and it comes at you hard and unforgiving. And then second to that, you begin to not necessarily accept it, but to take on this belief that in some way, shape, or form, you deserve it. Because it's always been that way, right? And so that's where I find myself, is in those dark times, is focused on, here we are again. How did we get here? That self-deprecation speak, that talking yourself down, whatever it is. There's a MGK song, "Watch Me Take a Good Thing and F It Up All in One Night." Like, that may as well be my theme song, because he's self-imploding. I always look for, how did I cause this? And I take that back to the times when things were done to me that I didn't cause, but somehow wear that shame and blame all these years later. And so, like I said, there's still hard days. I don't fall as deep and it's hard. And I think 75% of that is being healthy, focused on clean eating and what I put into my body, making sure I move my body every day, not just your 10,000 steps, right? But water, um, processed foods. Not look, I'm not a vegan or any of these like bizarro people, but I focus on quality things as I'm able to with the sudden increase in some cost of meat. I may be buying sirloin instead of strip steaks, right? But the fact of the matter is, I think there's a big part of that strength that comes in being healthy and not having these compounding physical problems. And weight for me, food was my immediate substitute after alcohol. I I just would gorge myself to feel satiated, to feel comfort, to feel okay in those dark days without alcohol. And so I think taking care of yourself physically is so important. And then you've got to do some mental work, right? And there's dirt. If you're hopeless and there's things that have happened, you got to name those things and you got to talk about them. And sometimes you got to go back and feel them. And there's all kinds of ways and help out there.
So,
But
so there's definitely a journey that we have to take, and I think that we're both extremely blessed because somehow, even not because of us, somehow we stumbled across things that that aided us along the journey. But if we think back to, I think back to when I was 14 years old, even after the first time that I stopped getting high and drinking and abusing alcohol. If I really think back, my mindset, because the mindset is everything, like you're talking about now. I mean, it's really mindset is the key. But when I was 14 and let's go back to 10, 11, 12, 13, I didn't know any of that. All I knew was here I am in the midst of this confusion where nobody understands me. It feels like the whole world is against me. I absolutely hate myself because I took on all the words that I heard from other people about who I was. I now took ownership of them. So I was a piece of shit. The world was full of shit. The world was unprepared for me. And I couldn't see at that moment, I couldn't see where I am today. Right. So it was just that. It was just all that negative self-hate. Don't really care if I die, but I'm not in a rush to die, but I really don't care about living. And that's the thing. So there's thousands and thousands of kids who are going through the exact same thing. It may look different, but the exact same moments of feeling helpless and hopeless, and the world is just heavy and so much weight, right? And they don't know what we know. And God willing, and I pray that they all get a chance to know, because right now, and I know it's the same for you, life is amazing because I am in control of it. I have tools,
yeah.
right? But then I didn't. So, what I want you to talk a little bit about, or I want us to talk a little bit about, is when at those moments that we didn't have any hope, what did they, how did they take, how did they move from that space? Or how did you move from that space to where you are now? Now, we talked about, we all got together and we all had this experience of sobriety and these tools, but it's more about the mindset. Right. When things started really changing for you, what was the mindset that you had? And I think I just asked you like 10 different questions, maybe, but
No, I think it's still when you're at the bottom, right? Is how do you look up and see the surface and then push off that bottom to get back up above water and quit drowning? And that's a mindset shift. And it's, gosh, you can go with that. I could go 1,000 different ways, but I'll tell you, and you'll appreciate this and probably have these same thoughts. You can train the mind the same way you train the body. In fact, your body will last much longer than your mind. Your PRs, your maxes, your regimen and routine and discipline around that, it's dictated here. When you think you can't, you absolutely are gonna not make it. You're not gonna push through it. And so, but you can't just lock in one day and be like, I'm gonna do this. That doesn't work. Minds don't work that way, and they require an investment to train them. Much in the same way, you don't walk in the gym, never be in there, not knowing what you're doing, and put up 500 on the bench. It doesn't happen. But if you walk in that gym every day and a little bit pick up something heavy and push it up and down and then set it and walk away, and for me, I enjoy the simplicity of that concept and of lifting and exercising, and for me, yoga. And I actually am now a yoga teacher. I only teach once a week because I absolutely yoga saved my life, or it took me to the next level personally. But I teach in my class that your mind will want to bail out of a pose long before your body does. And it is that same training. And it starts with, you have to want to live 51% to you want to die or leave this world 49%. Like, you just got to have 1% more of wanting to be here, regardless of the circumstance. And I know there's bad ones out there. Like, we've both been through them. And sometimes you think this is the end of the world and this is where it ends. And thank God, because now I don't have to suffer. But if you learn to work with your mind, sometimes you got to wash it and clean it. And that's going to therapy or talking to somebody or finding a life coach or somebody that understands that sometimes you just need to talk about these records that are playing up here before the lyrics they're singing make sense. And sometimes you got to rewrite those lyrics. And sometimes it's a beat you just got to learn to ride, even though it's not your favorite. Those emotions come. Like I said, hard days don't go away. They get easier because, again, you have tools, and because you've invested in training your mind through therapy, through exercise, through clean eating. I read a book called Atomic Habits. It's a great book. I'm not
Great book.
promoting it, but it was the broke it down into the simplest thing for me, right? And that is making one small change. And so in getting healthy for me, I was like, I'm going to log what I eat. I'm not going to change what I eat, but I'm not going to lie to myself. And for 90 days, I logged everything I put in my body. And then what I had was a map to begin to go manage that. And then it was, I'm going to focus on water. And I added that to logging. And then it was, I'm going to get 10,000 steps. And so training myself behaviorally just by making those small incremental changes, just one thing, not like we typically, anybody with ADHD or anxiety, right? Let me go ahead and build out a 75-step blueprint of how I'm going to master this. Let me go ahead and do all the research. And then let me either fail to start, fail during launch, fail halfway through, because we haven't committed mentally. We just want to control this and orchestrate it, but we haven't committed. It's a lot like married to a wonderful Hawaiian lady now, and that's such a blessing to be brought into that culture. I often joke that I'm their DEI hire, like they had to take me. But in going back to see my in-laws, so fortunate to do that every year and a half, and watch these guys surf. And I think I sit on the beach and watch them, and for me, it's so much about life. Like, these guys don't control the waves. They don't control when the sets roll in. They don't control when the swells come. We know in the winter the swells get bigger, but these guys just sit and wait for that wave. And sometimes that's the perfect wave and they ride it and it's gorgeous. Sometimes that wave beats the shit out of them and slams them on the reef, and the lifeguards are out there getting them on jet skis because it's too treacherous to swim. And that's so much how life is. We don't control the waves, the set, the depth, how high the face of the wave is. But what we do control is how we paddle into it, how we ride it, and how we recover when we fall off of that wave. And that's, so I sit there and watch these guys. Epic. I mean, it's just incredible to see places like Pipeline and Sunset Beach and these dudes just and young kids now as I age. But I always draw back to this training the mind, right? And as you invest in your mind, what you put in that mind, catching yourself with negative thinking is such a powerful thing, because once you have awareness of something, then it becomes a choice to make changes or to accept it, right? Whether you want to deny it or say, I can't control my thoughts, none of us can. But once we realize that thought is there of, I'm going to fail, I'm not good enough, nobody loves me, I eat too much, self loathing, whatever those bad thoughts are, once you can draw yourself to become conscious that they're there, you can then begin to supplant them with nutritious thoughts, right? And it's a fake it till you make it. It's a talk to yourself out loud sometimes, but it is investing and picking up those weights with your those mental weights and building some strength there and dealing with that past, and dealing with the situations that you're in these days. There's still a lot of kids out there probably in the system doing the same things, and I would argue they have it worse than we do. Like, we only saw what was on 3 channels of TV, or 25 channels of cable eventually.
It's crazy now.
And now later on, you don't know if it's real or fake, right? Like, I feel for my daughter and the sheer amount of information she has to process, knowing the human brain hasn't evolved physically in the 40 some years that separate me and my daughter in age, right? They're like an old computer running new code every day, and the pressure is just in elementary school is just insurmountable before you even add in complicated living situations and parents and the pandemic, which I guess created a lot of day drinking parents that probably did some damage while they had their kids stuck in the house for a couple of years, right? So,
and it's, the world's just different than when we grew up. When we grew up, there was a lot more community. Families knew each other.
yeah,
We had to talk to each other. We there was no cell phones. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Be buried in your cell phones. You had to actually, there was no Zoom, so you actually had to meet people in person. So there was a lot more humanness that was going on.
Yeah.
As I was listening to you, and I was thinking about everything that you had said previously, and if there was a code of steps to take, I think that one of the first steps, and I think that we would agree with this, is to connect with like-minded people. To be, one of the things I had the privilege of was meeting Craig, if you remember Craig, my sponsor. He's a Buddhist, and was at Club 24.
Wait, Craig that lived with, like, moved in when I moved out in Shaker?
No. And maybe you had moved by then, but were you around when I got sober this last time?
No, I left, man. I left in 93,
Okay, so
94.
it was 2010, was it? 2003. But I had the privilege of meeting this Buddhist sensei, and he was my sponsor, and he would always tell me these things. And one of the things that he would always say to me is, he says, most of us are swimming in water up to our chin, dying of thirst. And what that basically means is that most of us are running around with all of these problems, dying, believing that we're the only ones having these problems, when we're all experiencing basically the same thing. And if we open our mouth, help is right there. And I think that that's the whole thing about the community that we had, is that each one of us was dying inside. And when we found the like-minded people, we were able to start talking. And I think that that's where the separation of dying and living is when you hear yourself express to somebody else really what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you begin to hear some truths, whether you take ownership or not. It then taps into this part of your brain where you can no longer believe that there's not something else.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew that they were better because we actually saw people who made changes and their life was better. We may not have, we had no idea really how to get there. Even though there was a blueprint put down for us, I didn't know how to really get so into it that I had the spiritual experience. I knew the words.
Yeah.
So then we saw that there was better, and then we got knowledge of it being better, or vice versa. And then at some point, we started taking ownership. And I think that's when the mind really changes and the mindset. It starts with, they used to always talk about this mustard seed. It starts with a mustard seed of faith or a mustard seed of knowledge. And I think that knowledge begins to create the thirst for more knowledge, and then we start to dig deeper, and then we start to take ownership, and we end up going to counseling, or we start getting involved in self-help books. And that's how my journey was. It was over a long period of time. But when I was 14 was where I think that fuse was lit of me wanting something different. And then I eventually I grew into it.
Yeah, I think, for both of us, having been sober and out and then back to sobriety, the seeds planted, whatever, however you want to illustrate that, we knew the whole time. There's 30 years of drinking alcoholically. And look, I would get control sometimes, right? Because I had to.
Oh, yeah.
Look, I'm not alcoholic. I got this.
You got to prove yourself right.
Yeah, I could do it. And I could. And it's like having self-control and diarrhea. Like you can hold it for a while, for sure. But eventually you're going to lose that battle. And every time, shitty pants or waking up and having to apologize to my wife again thankfully I wasn't violent, but I deserved to lose it all. And so you definitely have to have that mind shift, right? That you go back to those tools that we knew. And I knew when I got there to the bottom that I had to get sober. And what I painfully knew was that was just part one, right? Like that just removed the anesthetic. The garbage was still down there, and I had to go dig it up and process it, and relive it. And again, through therapy and through fitness and through yoga and all of these and self-help books, some Buddhism in there, anything that I could consume as I got hungrier and hungrier. In fact, I made an Instagram post. I had to go look at it at some point. It's a fireplace. Years ago, when you came back from a conference, you shared this, and maybe it was part of your lead, or maybe us just having coffee at Arabica talking about real shit as teenagers. But you talked about feeding this fire at this retreat. I didn't go on it. It was in Pennsylvania. I was really mad I couldn't go for whatever reason, because you guys came back with all this fellowship and stories, like a place for us, right? Like this real raw. But you told this story to me in some context about you having this realization that as you threw these logs on the fire and you fed them, this fire grew hotter and hotter. And I think you took it to resentment, right? As you fuel these things, but you could really apply that to anything is I have these negative thoughts and I begin to add more negative to them. This energy, this negativity is growing. But if you're for 1 second like, oh, no, like let me just pretend and say some kind things, right, about myself for a while. But having those tools, and then it comes back to the fellowship. Like you cannot do it alone. You can't. And finding those people who will say the things out loud that are hard to say, they're out there. There's support groups everywhere. There's 12-step programs for whatever ails you these days. There's a 12-step program. There's social media people out there. Sobriety is free. I would advise against people that look to profit from it unless they're a professional treatment center and going down for counseling and diet and all these things, because sobriety is free. In fact, it'll save you a lot of money the longer you can do it. But you gotta find those people and say the things, and whether that's one-on-one with a therapist, a counselor, a life coach, whether that's in group settings, when you get comfortable with the darkness, to shine the light on it in front of other people. And then I think there's some self-forgiveness that we have to separate out the times that we were a victim and the times that we have to accept that those things happen, because no matter what, those things will never disappear. They don't ever go away. The PTSD symptoms do as you seek help and therapy, and sometimes for people that's medication and all of whatever those things are. Each journey is different. But in that journey, there absolutely has to be some fellowship of like-minded people that you share that journey with. And then I think you got to give it back, right? We cannot transmit that which we have, do not receive, have ourselves. I can't remember. God, it's been years.
Transmit that we don't have. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's this work you're doing, right? For me, that's some philanthropy. Like, look, Heights turned his back on me because of my transportation problem. Their solution was, oh, you don't come to school, let's expel you year after year. Um, but I donate money to two different Heights charities that help underprivileged kids. You know why? Because I made it out despite at the time the only way to deal with kids like me was to kick them out and focus on the 3,900 other kids that wanted to be there or went there. So I get it and I don't fault them, but it feels good to go back and provide into these community-based charities that are out there helping other kids, right? So with fellowship, people that have the same experience, the same energy, the same frequency, the same belief, the spirituality, whatever those common things are. We, during the pandemic, I was managing about slightly north of 400 people in four continents. Like, it was crazy. I had a staff of 12 people around the world, but the whole organization was 400. And it was in the pandemic, and it was weird because everybody was in our house, and we had to do our job in the IT business. And throughout this whole time, it occurred to me, one, I thrive in prison conditions. Like, I have a wonderful house, fortunate, have a great career, so I have a great space to be locked in. Um, but I thrive in those conditions. But humans evolved, if you want to be just pure science. I'm not talking evolution, but people have succeeded as an organism because of their ability to come together and unify on common things, right? And make sure you're not the slowest guy out running the saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah.
And so, but people have evolved socially, and we need so much of that because none of us really understand this experience of life and being born, and we have this set amount of time, and then you have all these pressures of capitalism that we have in America today, and violence, and all of these things, and nobody really knows how this journey is supposed to look or how you're supposed to think about it. And so bringing those like-minded people together can be one of the most beautiful things in the world. It can also be bad, right? There's hate groups out there that find other people that like to hate, and so stuff like this, bringing a positive message, just pours a little water on that hate out there.
Think about it. We are so intelligent now, though, that we figured out how not to deal with each other. You know what I mean? And
Yes,
how to get only the information that supports what we already believe.
it's yes. In fact, I have a whole training thing on bias and confirmation bias and how this world just exacerbates. You can believe whatever you want because you can go find somebody that agrees with you.
You touched on something though that and you touched on it at the same time that I was thinking about it, and that is love, right? So the thing that I've learned in the philanthropy and is a form of love. The thing that I've realized is all of the stuff that I went through as a child, all the pain, the suffering, the self-hate, the self-punishment, all of that didn't, when I learned to turn that into love is when it found its proper place, if that makes sense. When I was talking to a lady the other day, and it occurred to me that the only thing that will erase pain is love. The only thing that can take somebody from a victim to somebody having unique experience is love. Because all the stuff that I went through, once I figured out that it really gave me the ability to love other people and to understand the pain of other people, that's when, for a lack of better way to articulate it, it stopped haunting me.
Yeah.
So I really believe that that's the key to life, is to get to a point where, number one, we're not drowning in swimming in water up to our chin, dying of thirst, thinking we're all alone, but we take ownership of our feelings and we share them with somebody else, that it turns into love, and the pain, the scars stay there, but the pain disappears.
Yeah. And, you know, the more people you have in the equation, the more diluted that pain can become, right? Because I agree with love. And look, I won't get into my anti Catholic establishment hippie belief system. Because I like to take a little bit from every culture, which again, the heights, right? Like, oh my gosh, we had every religion that you want or could imagine, and every shape, size, color, sexual orientation of person. Such a cool place. But I do think that love is universal to a lot of structured religion and to a lot of philosophy and all of the things that come with that. Um, the kindness, right, and generosity, and everything that just falls into that bucket of love. But you're absolutely right, and it comes back to turning that script around and finding self-love and finding your capacity to love other people without condition. That's a hard lesson. I still struggle with it, right?
Well,
Or yeah, we're human, and there's no up without down. There's no black without white. Like, we live in this world of juxtaposition of light and dark, the force and the dark side. Like, pick it, God and the devil, whatever it is that you want to pick. But love is absolutely monumental, and kindness. And I try to carry that off of my yoga mat. Kindness, do no harm. Anahata is a part of that yogic system of beliefs and how you interact with the world. It works great for me on most days until I get in the car. And let me tell you, oh my gosh, I lose my mind. There is no love in the 7 mile drive I have to work every day. It's an opportunity that constantly presents itself for sure, but it's all things are possible once you learn to love yourself and to lead with that. And it's hard as damaged people to tear open that paper and show this vulnerability. And there's mean people, there's shitty people in the world. They're out there. A lot of them drive at the same time of day I do, apparently. But love and kindness is the way to lead. Even in the corporate world, right? Like, there's so much of this. Give me what I need now, so I can get done my things I need to get done on my screens, and a lack of this human contact and element. We've become a red, green, or yellow dot in a Teams meeting, and so I'm back in the office 5 days a week generally, and I thrive on being able to see people and smile and say hi and how are you, and the kids, right? And we're there to collaborate, as corporate America says we're doing. But what we really are doing is fulfilling this human need to be around other humans.
absolutely.
And even in transactional day to day, you'd be amazed at, as I become confident and okay in my own skin, people, when you look at them and smile and say good morning or anything, many people will look away, they won't respond. And so people are out there still hurting and suffering, right? And the more kindness we can spread, we'll just continue to try to drown it out.
The,
I
the
still,
world, the world will never run out or have too much love. It'll never
nah,
have a need for love.
no, it is needed. And I'm glad I can do it through sober eyes these days, right? Especially having a 9-year-old.
In closing, if there was three things that you thought were important for that young man or woman to know, that's stuck in that place where they feel like life is so overwhelming and there is no way out, what advice would you give them? What three things do you think would be the most important?
Find your people that are in the same thing. I think you've said it, and it's been kind of a reoccurring theme here. Suffering is not unique to anybody. Nobody has a corner on a terrible life. And for every story I've told, there are people who suffered way more than me. And it's not about the weight that we carry. It's the fact that we all carry weight, whether it's 100 pounds or whether it's 5 pounds. It feels heavy. find your people who have been there, whether it's support groups, whether it's meetings, 12-step programs, Weight Watchers, what there's so much out there, community centers, rec centers, your churches, synagogues, temples, um, mosques. Let me cover everybody because I do truly respect all of it. Even the Church of the Spaghetti Monster, if that's your thing. Find your people. Know that leaving the earth is going to happen for all of us, but doing it of your own accord before you're supposed to is creating a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And even those people that have suffered and are suffering know that there's moments of hope and moments of light, and hungry people get fed sometimes. And for that, I tell everyone that permanent solution is not the way to go. And then I would say the third thing is become aware of everything you do to yourself, for yourself, what you eat, how you sleep, are you hydrated? Not only that base physical layer, right? But also the nourishment of your thoughts, and back to that training the mind element and supplanting those negative thoughts with dismissing those and adding positive thoughts, and having daily meditation or daily commitments. Oh my gosh, the word's escaping me. Positive thoughts, right? And so those would be the three things. Find your people. Don't quit. Don't give up hope, because no situation is truly hopeless. People like us can make it from trap houses and other places. Then there's hope. And then take care of yourself physically and mentally, and watch what you put in that body, whether it's alcohol, drugs, junk food, soda pop, whatever your thing is. Begin to be kind with yourself first. That'd be the three things I got.
Jamie, it's been an honor to catch up with you.
Oh my gosh.
As we sat here and talked, I could tell so many stories of different things. And again, I don't think that we can say what would have happened if this hadn't happened. But what I can say is my connection with you and some other people probably extended my life. It definitely gave me the ability to buy some time to make some other decisions. I can't imagine what my life would have been like had I have not connected with my people, right? And man, I mean, we had a lot, those periods, that time was amazing to me.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It was absolutely, absolutely amazing. So now I don't want to just thank you for doing this podcast. Number one, I want to thank you for helping to save my life, for helping to be part of the platform and the gathering of knowledge that would eventually allow me to live the life that I have now. And just for being you, man. I mean, we sit here and look at each other, and I say, damn, the man that you've grown into. Yoga doesn't surprise me. You doing yoga doesn't surprise me at all. It's like, had I been so aware back then, I could have known that you would have grown into a yoga person, because that's something that we both shared, is this sensitivity to spirituality, right? Both of us we're just sensitive to stuff that most people don't pay attention to.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to thank you for doing this podcast and for being my friend for all these years.
And the feeling's mutual. And, as I talked about that, being at that point of hopelessness, like you saw me there.
Yeah.
You helped me when I was at the bottom because I was rejected, right? And underneath that was all of this other heavy weight that came to be. And so you see me there. And honestly, you were there as an angry teenager. I wanted to die. I just didn't have the means or the guts. And thankfully, I had people like you. So you saved my life. And you gave me somebody to look up to. You helped me get jobs, taught me how to be a salesman. I learned so much from you in those years that I've leverage to help myself be a successful person in life, to not be a deadbeat, to pay my bills and not be on the run. And so I want to thank you for inviting me. I'm here to support your effort, bring hope out there to those people that need it, to know that. And it's so easy to talk about when you're here and you're on that journey and you're 5, 10, 15 years in. But never forget that past. Never forget to take a look in the rear view and remember what was back there. But I appreciate you, dude. I love you all these years later. And I look forward to the next time we get to catch up.
Love you, man.
Love you too, dude. Have a good one.